Hey there, coming at you from the endorphin chamber. Yes, I am forever now calling the cabin of my Mustang the endorphin chamber. I think that was one of the most clever pieces of marketing that I have seen through the whole Mustang reveal. And of course, this video is going to be my thoughts about the new Mustang. Of course, being a very avid Mustang enthusiast and owner of 3 different generations of Mustang, I have a lot to say about the new generation S650 Mustang here. And well, we're going to go over all that in the video. All right, so first things first, the entire reveal. Let's just touch a small portion of that real quick. This has been being hyped up for a while now. Over a year, this has been really starting to drum up to be something that was supposed to be, well, at least what I thought was supposed to be something just next level, extravagant. I don't even know. I guess I was expecting a more enthusiastic presentation of this car that I don't think was actually delivered. The whole reveal was a bit lackluster and almost kind of seems rushed. You know, I'm a bit upset because if you ever seen the first Avengers Endgame movie, you know exactly how I feel. They left a lot to be desired about this whole situation. You know, during the whole event, Ford was like, hey, you guys like Mustangs, right? Well, we like Mustangs too, and we build Mustangs. Here's someone who builds Mustangs. Since you like Mustangs, here's our new Mustang. Oh, by the way, we're going racing. Goodbye. That's what it was. You know, they vaguely touched on what makes this new generation even worth looking into. You know, they highlighted these almost gimmicky features, although some of them are kind of cool, like the Fox body gauge cluster emulation. Like, that's cool, you know, but I'm not going to rush out and buy a brand new Mustang because it has a Fox body gauge emulation. Like, come on now. It was a party trick, much like the drift feature, you know, on the e-brake. As cool as that is, and I'm actually kind of glad to see it there, but the engineering involved in that, you know, it's not something I'm going to use per se, right? And not say other people won't actually use that feature. And I know a lot of other people are saying, well, you know, it's great because out of the box, you can get a great drift car. Like, you already have everything you need to go drifting. You know, you just make sure you get the steering angle kit put in, and there you go. How many people, and I'm sure there will be, but realistically, how many sales of the Mustang do you think are going to be made so people can do that? I'm sure it's going to be a very small percent. You know, I'd welcome that feature more than the digital Fox body gauge emulation, but and another party trick feature, which is cool and kind of weird, something that probably won't get used too much depending on who you are. And I actually made a whole separate video on this months ago when it first was kind of announced, was the remote rev feature. It's just something that's cool they could throw in. I was expecting more. I was honestly expecting really big, like, just technological advances in the car. I mean, you know, they were just vague about everything. It's just really disappointing because I would figure that as much hype as went into this whole thing, that the car was going to be something extraordinary. I'm not saying the car is horrible. I'm just saying that I was expecting a lot more. Let's put it that way. My expectations were up here. The bottom is here. And Ford came in somewhere around the middle mark, probably. You know, I think if all the hype and all of the stuff going around, you know, that was foreshadowing everything that we've been reading and seeing and talking about for over a year now. If all of that didn't take place, then my expectations probably would have been more realistic, I guess. Whatever, so be it. It is what it is. With all of that said, let's go into the pros of the S650. Obviously, the big pros, I think, to the S650 over the S550 platform is that it's getting updated powertrains. Once again, Ford did not indulge on any specific information about what makes it all new. The only thing they kept saying on, you know, and this was more or less regards to the Coyote, was that it receives this new dual throttle body intake setup with dual airboxes and all that. And that was pretty much it. And, you know, they covered some other small details like, oh, you can order it with a steel oil pan. Like, oh, great. Oh, wow. Why wouldn't I want a plastic oil pan on my performance car? Thanks, Ford. I appreciate you. But regardless of that, they didn't, they didn't really go into what makes it all new. Like, okay, it's all new. What is all new about it? Why should I care about this new engine? What is going to make me want to spend my money on this car when it comes out? You know, it's a lot of that was not covered. Any other small technical details about the powertrain or anything was more or less covered separately when the press and other individuals got to interview the engineers themselves. It was then more small, but still extremely vague details came out about all of this. And it still doesn't really answer any questions. So, you know, who really knows what's all new about it? It could just be another corporate mumbo jumbo, you know, all new. You know, this whole car is supposed to be all new, but how can it be all new if it was reportedly based off the current generation? I don't know how much of that is true. Maybe it's just marketing jargon. Maybe it is all new. No one knows because Ford didn't say anything. They just kept it very cut and dry. But with that said, the upgrades to 5-liter probably are very welcoming. One thing I do have to say that I've seen off the bat was they changed the engine cover. And I know a lot of people are probably excited over this. They went back to, you know, the cover that just goes over the engine itself and not covering the entire engine bay like the current S650 GTs do. And I'm sure that's a welcomed, you know, in many ways upgrade over the current gen. Is just having that cover is more or less like an updated version of the second gen Coyote, you know, 15 through 17 cars, you know, that with the intake cover. And I like that. That's a nice feature about the new car that I think was, I don't even know that anyone said anything about it, but yeah, that's definitely a pro if you ask me. And whether this new twin throttle body intake is really going to benefit anything, who knows? You know, the current Coyote can make more power with the same intake and everything, you know, with just tuning changes. Why does the Coyote need more air? Is there different camshaft profiles? You know, are we tuning the car to have a broader power band overall? You know, like, these are questions I wish were answered and they were not. So, you know, they're saying that they're targeting 500 horsepower, but it can be anything upwards from 480, I guess, to 500. They didn't officially announce a number. My guess is because they have not actually did any, you know, emissions testing, or I guess like all the MPG testing that the car needs before it is sold. So I guess until they get all of that ironed out, they haven't actually focused into, you know, proper horsepower number. Could be less than 500. It could be more than 500. It could be 500 even. I don't know. It all depends on where they land with the goals they have to, you know, meet for the CAFE standards. So that is what it is. So maybe this new 4th gen Coyote actually might be more friendly when it comes to upgrading and tuning, which that whole thing's gonna be covered in the cons section of this video. So I have more to say about that in that section. But aside from the 5-liter, we have apparently an all new EcoBoost. So it's still a 2.3-liter EcoBoost, and once again, no one knows much about it. The only things that they really indulge to say that it's all new and that it has a fully electronically controlled turbo. Okay, so I don't know exactly what that means. The only thing that can make this more controllable is the wastegate. You know, right now the wastegate is vacuum actuated by an electronic solenoid. So the only way you can make it fully electronically controllable is having electronic actuator go directly to the wastegate instead. I don't know where there's benefits in that, honestly, from an engineering standpoint. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. That's the only thing I think that can make it a fully electronically controlled turbo. So there's that. Other than that, we don't know power. We don't know nothing. So, you know, how much more power does the new 2.3 make? I don't know. Is it going to be pretty much the same as what's in the HPP Mustang I have? Who knows? Is it going to be more? Who knows? We don't know nothing. Small details is that the EcoBoost is apparently only stuck with the 10 speed. So that sucks for those who would like to have it with the manual. So that's kind of a downgrade. And everything carries over to the GT exactly the way it was. You know, 10 speed, MC82, and the Tremec for the higher trim level Dark Horse, which is pretty much taking the Mach 1 spot, which we all know took the G350 spot. So it's just this progression carrying over that transmission. So all of that transfers over to the V8 cars, which was kind of a bummer, because also a video I made not long ago going over the wish list of things I would like to have seen in the new Mustang, which almost none of it actually happened, by the way, but was a option for the Tremec even in a regular GT. Just having that option, like not have it, like I'm sure a lot of people would pay, you know, a couple grand more for that transmission and not want to have to pay the real big price tag premium to jump up to something like the Dark Horse, which we know is probably going to be closer to 60 grand, instead of getting a GT with a few options and a Tremec and be like under 45. Like that is a huge bargain if that is something you want. So I don't know. That was also something I was kind of disappointed in, but I wouldn't actually count that as a con. That was just something I wish Ford would have done with this new generation. With all of that, I'm not sure if there's any more pros really that I personally would say that the new generation has over the current S550. Hopefully, if it is all new, you know, chassis, maybe it will offer better handling improvements over the current generation. Who knows? We're all gonna have to wait and see on that. But otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and get into the cons section of this video and go over the pretty long list of cons that I feel that this new generation Mustang has. These are all very subjective, but otherwise could be partially objective shortcomings that and observations that I see that the new generation Mustang has. You know, probably one of the biggest cons of this new generation is the fact that it's got a locked PCM. This is starting to make its way into a lot of new Ford vehicles. Kind of first showed up in the F-150. Now it's going to make its way to the Mustang. So tuning this new car is going to be probably near impossible, at least by reflashing the ECU. You know, unless you go full aftermarket standalone control system, you know, you probably won't, at least from what we see now, be able to tune this thing. The only other options are piggyback systems, which aren't terrible, and they're actually pretty viable options for these types of locked computers, but they're often a lot more expensive than your typical handheld tuner and some over-the-air tunes. Not all the time are those setups as beneficial as a reflash the ECU, depending on the car. That is probably the single biggest con that I can see right now of the new S650 Mustang. So I'm gonna say off the bat, I am not a fan of that digital, it looks like a computer monitor, a gaming monitor sitting in front of you behind a steering wheel. I'm not a huge fan of that dash setup. Really, I'm not. And honestly, that right there would be the whole reason I would never buy an S650 Mustang. I can't get into that. You know, this whole new design thing of having screens just protruding from the dash is really kind of an awful, if you ask me, trend. I am not personally enjoying seeing in any car, let alone a Mustang. Now, I would be perfectly fine with this all if the screens were broken up as they should be, with one screen sitting center, right, in the center console. It's fine to, if it protruded up from the dash a little bit, but then to have the gauge screen recessed into a spot that's supposed to be, you know, like a gauge cluster. I really don't like that they went away from that, and you have this flat, giant screen. I'm sorry, I can't get with that. If that's something you like, then great, because this will be the first Mustang to ever have such a thing. But for me, they really need to keep any digital screens the way they currently are. This is a huge downgrade for me. And because of this massive screen, It changes a lot of traditional Mustang styling, like the dashboard, you know, the double brow dashboard that's been a styling cue for the Mustang since day one is now gone, because you have this big screen. Even if it was there, you wouldn't see it as a driver unless you peeked in through your windshield or you looked over your screen like, oh yeah, that's a nice classic design there. Okay, let me go back to my computer screen and see if I can play some Call of Duty. Like, come on, man. This kind of thing does not belong in a car like a Mustang. And it's been said a couple different times that, you know, in a high-tech SUV or an EV even, or some luxury car, that's perfectly fine. In a driver-based sports car, muscle car, pony car, whatever kind of car it is, that's not acceptable at all. I think it is a huge con. You know, and actually it's been brought up in conversation. What about convertibles and even just regular cars? You know, this giant flat screen, is it going to have problems with sun glare? I can only imagine a huge glossy screen, you know, having visibility problems when it comes to glare from the sun or any light source. You know, that's kind of a concern when there are things you want to be looking at. That's a huge con for me. Aside from that, other bits in the interior don't really all that bother me that much, except not having physical controls. I love the current interior. I've said this before, I'll say it again, I love it. It has pretty good feeling things. Everything has a nice tactile feeling. I don't have to take my eyes off the road. I can reach over here and I know where everything is by muscle memory, and I can touch things and turn them on without being distracted while driving. In the new Mustang, a lot of the features here are controlled only by access in the infotainment system. So your climate control, a lot of that is no longer accessible by switches and dials and knobs. It's all in the infotainment system. And I've driven many cars like that, and it's an extremely frustrating experience, and it's very distracting, especially if the radio can get all wonky and freeze up on you and you're trying to switch settings and drive. That's a recipe for disaster, and it happens a lot. And that is another modern you know, automotive trend that needs to freaking go away. I want physical buttons, okay, or at least separate buttons from the infotainment system that controls my different features. With that, you know, the toggle switches, that I love the toggle switches in this car. Going through all the different toggles, to me, that's fun. That's a very, you know, fun, engaging experience that I get to have with my car. That, you know, is not going to be present in the new Mustang. You know, it gets these little wimpy buttons, but, you know, it's those things that I do not think are an upgrade, and I think it's quite honestly going backwards for the Mustang, and I think it's a con, quite honestly. I really do. Now, the next con goes into also the next section, and that's just going over the styling of the vehicle as a whole. Wow. I don't really know what to think about the styling of it. Like, some angles I love it, and some angles I just don't. Some features I like, and some I don't. Like the grille and the front end. The front end doesn't really bother me all that much. The grille does, because it just looks too bold but doesn't actually have any dimension to it. It kind of looks like it has some, you know, big lips or something, some fat lips, and it's just like like that's what it looks like to me. It doesn't look refined. Now, out of all of the ones they showed, the one that had the best looking front end was the Dark Horse. That had the probably most cohesive looking front end out of all of them, the EcoBoost, the GT. You know, I think it's one of those things where you're not really going to know until you see the car in person, because that was kind of the thing about the, you know, 18 and up Mustangs, you know, on the internet, you know, through the eyes of a camera and then being displayed on whatever you're watching. When they redesigned these and had this lower sloped front end, it looked goofy. I'm sorry, it did. But when you see them in person, you're like, oh my God, wow. At least for me, I was like, this looks good. I ended up buying one because I loved how it looked so much in person. And this very well could be the same story with the new Mustang. We know that there are going to be other, you know, variations of the Mustang coming as this new generation progresses. So it very well easily could receive different styling for the front bumper and all that. And also there's the aftermarket. But It sucks that you would have to rely on the aftermarket and spend time and money replacing parts on a car just so it doesn't look weird. Usually you spend time and money replacing parts on a car to more or less personalize it to you, not just to change a very probably, you know, equally disliked feature. But it is what it is. Moving on to the opposite end of the car, the rear end, the probably second most problematic visually appearing piece of this whole car. Man, I don't know what they did, but they needed to not do what they did. Looking at the back of this car, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the design. You know, the taillights just look weird. The whole thing looks weird to me. And with the help of the aftermarket, I think if they can make some taillights that kind of popped out a little bit and gave some dimension, and honestly kind of style them after the taillights on 18 and up cars, I think that would be a huge visual upgrade. I think actually having some dimension popping out from that really aggressive angled, you know, rear trunk area would actually might look pretty good. But if you're having taillights that are pretty much flush with that line, I don't think that's going to look good. Just something I don't really like, and a lot of people seem to be on the same page. They're not really a big fan of that. Some like it, some don't. It's just one of those things. Overall, the dimensions of the car look about the same. It almost seems a little bit more like stretched, if you will, but that's like basically from the front to, I would say about the B-pillar area, you know, right behind the driver door. After that, it seems very squished. And I think with that dimension, it makes this look almost like a damn Camaro, man. Like, in certain angles, it looks like a Camaro, and people have been comparing this to a Camaro, and they're putting them side by side, and some of the body lines are almost identical to a Camaro, which is absurd. I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't want a Mustang to look like a Camaro. If I wanted a Camaro, I'd buy a Camaro. I'd buy a Mustang so it looks like a Mustang. So, like, it's just got a lot of controversial styling. The Sketch Monkey. I'm going to go ahead and link his video in the description, but he is a great graphic artist, and, you know, he does all kinds of car restyling videos, and he, I think, hit the nail straight on the head in how the Mustang should have looked. Not to mention, he called out one of the biggest styling cues that's completely missing from the styling of the new Mustang, and that is the actual side profile of the door. You know, the lines that follow the door from the front fender all the way back, that has been styling of the Mustang from the get-go. And in fact, the only generation that didn't have that was the Fox body. But every generation after that went back to having that styling cue in the door. Whereas this new Mustang doesn't have it at all. It is a smooth side profile, and there's no edges or anything. And I think his render of this is probably, like, if this is what it looked like, I wouldn't even be upset. He hit the nail on the head. Please go ahead, watch his video and support him. I almost want to see if we can get a petition signed, maybe get enough people together, submit it to Ford and say, hey, this is what your car should look like. Thank the Sketch Monkey. Because honestly, that is huge improvements and takes the design from questionable Camaro to full Mustang, no doubt. So yeah, go ahead, do that, support his video. But otherwise, back on to the final thoughts here for this video. Overall, I can't say I don't like the car. It's just probably not something I'm going to buy. There's not enough going on with this new platform to make me want to upgrade to. You know, if I was buying a Mustang for the first time, maybe it's a different story, but I've had many of them, and this being the best one, I'm not really impressed enough to want to go and spend my money on something like that. You know, I think if I'm going to upgrade from this car, I'm going to another S650 car. You know, I really want a GT350, so I'm probably never going to spend my money on another new Mustang. At the end of the day, you know, I'm just one fish in the big sea of other people, so, you know, different strokes for different folks. I think it will be a good car. I'm excited to see the evolution of this new Mustang. You know, even though at first I'm not really, you know, blown away, I think as it progresses, it's going to, I think they're going to fix a lot of what's going on with it and give it special treatment. You know, I think there's a lot that's being left unknown. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of technologies that are still on the table and sub-variants, performance variants are still on the table, but they're waiting, you know, as the generation progresses. Obviously, they do that for multiple reasons, but that's mainly to keep sales from going stagnant. I definitely expect something very interesting out of this generation. It's just, unfortunately, we know nothing about any future cars as of now, and we're left with just something a little bit different than we already have. So all in all, I think it's going to be a good car though. You know, I'm excited to see what people do with it. Excited to see on the road. I like to sit my car next to it, compare them side by side, and really get a good feel for what it is. And I would like to see the dark horse. You know, that's a whole new thing. I'm not really going to touch too much into it. But I think, you know, it's an interesting take on a performance trim, and I like to see how well that does for Ford. So yeah, all in all, it's not the worst thing they could have done. I think they could have done better, but hey, it is what it is. At least we have another generation of Mustangs, so I guess that's a good thing, right? Anyway, let me know your thoughts about the new generation Mustang. You like it, you hate it, what do you like about it, what do you not like about it? Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to have a nice open discussion about this, see what everyone has to say about it, because, you know, that's what this is community, and as a community we can grow. And I like to hear opinions because, you know, a lot of times, you know, the voice of the community can be beneficial, especially for things that are widely unaccepted. So let me know what you think in the comments. Otherwise, it's going to wrap it up here for this video. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, share with everyone you know. If you want to see more content like this and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Keep a lookout for next true car enthusiast video.